Okay, at the start of this video, I've just selected the 4 faces from the side of the original mesh we created that was for the basis of the skeleton, or the shape of the skeleton. And I've just hit duplicate faces, or edit mesh duplicate faces, and that's given us this piece of geometry, and I'm just adding some extra edge loops to it to keep it nice and curved, and it'll give us this nice little square in the middle. We can extrude that in, manipulate the corner points to make a more circular shape. There we go. Again, it's so difficult with hard edge modeling to keep the surface smooth. You've got to check it all the time. And we're just going to extrude those faces in just to create a nice loop around them, and then extrude them inwards. And you can just see I've just flattened the faces there in world space as well, just to make it a little bit easier to add extra objects onto it. Okay, so we've made another quad cylinder there. I'm just going to rotate it around the x-axis and just scale it to fit in the hole we've just created. Again, I'm just pressing Control and using the scale handle of the axis. I don't want to scale the object, and that scales it in the other 2 axes. I'm just extruding those top faces in, and then we're going to extrude those right in, and that's going to be a hole that the wing comes out of later on. And select that loop we created, and just extrude that inwards again. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to create a number of edge loops and just extrude the faces out a little bit. It's just going to give us an extra little bit of detail that when we texture it and light it, or if you texture it and light it, it'll give you some really nice specular highlights, and all these different pieces will just catch the reflections a little bit differently. And it's so important that you don't just have flat faces when you're going for detailed hard surface work, because sometimes it does look very, very, very fake if you've just got one flat surface with no changes and no details in it at all. Okay, so there we go. We've extruded quite a few of those faces out now, and if we smooth that, just add a couple of edge loops to harden the back up. We've got a nice bit of detail there. And I've just selected the loop around that hole as well, and just hit duplicate face, so that'll give us another object that we can use as a border for that indentation there, and just extrude that out. And it's a very, very easy way of adding layers of detail. So we're going to do the same for this overall piece of geometry. Is we're just going to add some edge loops in there, select the faces that we created by doing that, and then hit duplicate faces. That gives a nice piece of separate geometry that we can work with. Now we're going to extrude the 4 quarters of this piece of geometry out to make it look like it's built from 4 different pieces. And obviously that'll make the corners very round if we don't add edge loops on the really tight to the edges. So I've just used the slide edge tool there, which is fantastic. It doesn't move the edges in world space, it just slides it along the mesh, so we can move the edges closer to the edge pretty easily. Then I've inserted a couple of edge loops towards the middle as well, just to keep those middle corners nice and tight. And I'm just playing with these verts, because when you add edge loops into a circular object, it automatically makes it non-circular again. So you've got to be very careful when doing that. Okay, we're just going to extrude this quarter now. So we're going into world space and just moving it out on the Z. And I'm just selecting the major faces and then hitting Shift and the greater than key, which is just an easier way of, it just expands your selection by 1 in every direction. It's just easier than trying to select those small faces that we've created by inserting those edge loops. And you can see it's important to make sure that all of these edges line up, all these extrusions line up. This is the kind of precision you need for good hard edge modeling. I think if people would be able to notice that something was wrong if these edges didn't quite line up. You want to keep it really nice and smooth. There we go. Okay, so now you can see that center circular portion has been kind of ruined a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert some edge loops and just try and force that circular shape back on it a little bit. There we go. That's not too bad. Now if we select the border that we created before, pull that out as well. And just sort the depth out for that, so after we've extruded. And then we're going to select the border that we created for the whole piece as well, and just extrude that a couple of times as well. Obviously when we do, you can just see here as well, I'm just changing these verbs because we've just inserted those edge loops to sort the center circle out, and it's just flattened a couple of these faces. So got to be very careful of that. So we're just curving those faces again, just to make it nice and consistent and keeping the mesh nice and smooth. Okay, now we're just going to extrude this border, and when we do, we're just going to have to insert a few edge loops again, just to keep the corners nice and tight and the edges nice and tight. Because if you smooth it, you can see the corners fold over a little bit, smooth over. So just adding some extra edge loops just to keep it nice and organized, and some to keep the outside corners tight as well. Okay, now we're going to add the screws that go along the outside of this border. So we've just created a quad cylinder again. Just hit some edge loops into it. And I'm just going to add a few more edge loops just to create a central cross, and then we can extrude that cross in. Again, I'm just worried obviously about that circular shape, so just pulling those new edge loops out. Extrude that cross in, fix those verts manually. And then extrude that cross in. Now I've cut a little bit of this out. We just see the start of it. We'll just go into the top view and just sort this circular shape out, because obviously we've ruined the circular shape again a little bit by adding all of these edge loops. So you can just go into the top view and just spread them out a little bit and just regain that circular shape. And if you need to, you can create a nerved circle and just use that as reference where all the points should be. So there we go, just spreading it out. And that's the result. I've just add another edge loop, and we just extrude those faces just to create a bit of a lip, as you'd get on a flathead screw. Add a couple of edge loops to keep it tight. And then what we're going to do is we're going to geometry constrain this to the border. So we're going to select both of them and just isolate the selected. And then we select the border, shift select the screw, and then go to the animation menu set. Hit constraints and geometry, and that'll constrain the pivot point of the screw to the mesh. And then we can hit constraints normal, and it'll make sure that the screw is pointing the right way. So then it's just a case of moving the screw, duplicating it, selecting the one that's constrained to the surface, moving it and duplicating it. So again, I've cut this out of the video, but you'll see the final result. There we go. So that's all I've done. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go into side view, and we're going to create some curves that we are going to use as some twirls, for some twirls geometry on the side here. So just literally just using the EP curve tool and creating a curve, and then just manipulating the points. So I'll do a couple of these, and then obviously I'll skip past. And you'll see the final result again. It's a very rough curve, and then just tweaking the points. Okay, so that's the final result. I've grouped all the curves together, centered the pivot, and I'm doing it quarter by quarter so that we can work on the normals of the faces and have them angled the right way for each quarter. So if we just rotate this group of curves and try and place them as close as we can to where we want them. So I'm just tweaking the rotation, checking it in all the different angles. I'm just trying to get it as close as I possibly can. And then once we've got it as close as I can, I'm just going to shift select the mesh, go to Edit Mesh, Project Curves on Mesh, and then if we hide the original group of curves, you can see that it's duplicated our curves for us and moved them onto the mesh. So you can select how you want them projected in different axes or from current view if you go into the option box. And now all we have to do is create a polygon plane, scale it down, move it to the start of these curves, and select the plane, shift select the curve, and extrude it. And if like this shape where we've got a piece of geometry splitting into two, we'll just use the first extrusion for the main piece or the root. Just change the divisions there, and then add an extra edge loop, and select the face on the geometry, and just shift select the curve and then extrude that face. We've just reversed the curve direction there as well because it was just facing the wrong way. And there we go. Okay, so you see the finished thing now, and then next we're going to start on the front of the bird. So we're going to use the front plate and the breastplate, and we're going to add some cogs and some interesting details in there as well.